Okay, we're going to talk about tax incidents and what it looks like when a tax is imposed and how that affects tax revenue, deadweight loss, and changes in welfare. So if we look at this graph here, we see this graph of quantity supply or demand and supply for mountain bikes and dollars. And we're going to suppose that the government imposes an excise tax of $50 on mountain bikes. So a good first step is going to be to draw a tax wedge, which is essentially going to be a line between where that price is going to divide from the tax. So we're gonna drive that wedge between supply and demand, and because it's $50, we're gonna start approximately here at what would be like 55-ish, and we'll go up to here, which is approximately 105. So maybe 50 to 100 would be more accurate there. So we'll say that's our tax wedge here. Now for simplicity, let's say that this tax, instead of being 50, let's say that it's 60. That's going to make our lines a little bit cleaner here. Because then we can just go straight from 45 to 105. That's $60 wedge of our tax, because our tax is $60 on these goods. So now if we're trying to find total welfare and deadweight loss and tax revenue and all of these good things, a good idea is kind of partition off this left area. We're going to look at kind of our new consumer surplus, our new producer surplus, our tax revenue, and our deadweight loss. So remember, the area above the supply curve and below the price is going to be our producer surplus, and the area below the demand curve and above the price is going to be our consumer surplus. So it's going to look like those two green lines there. And then what we're going to want to do is look at what area is what. So if we zoom in here a little bit, we can look at this here. That's a bad. This is going to be our deadweight loss, because remember, deadweight loss is any transactions that would have taken price at equilibrium, or would have taken place at equilibrium at this original equilibrium point of $40 and 90 bikes, or 40 bikes and $90 here. That's our original equilibrium point. And because of our new tax wedge, all of these transactions are not happening. So that's going to be our deadweight loss. That's going to be the area of this triangle here. Right here to that point, and then down the demand curve here. Oops, I don't want that to happen. Like that. So that's going to be our deadweight loss, because that's all the transactions that would have happened that aren't happening now. But now, if we want to find our tax revenue, we're simply going to look for the dollars per tax, right? And we know that's $60. And the quantity sold, right? So this red line is the, no, I don't know why it keeps doing that. That red line is our the price amount of the tax, while the green lines are the quantity, right? So if we want to find tax revenue, we need to look at the quantity sold, which is going to be 20, our new quantity, times the amount of the tax, which is $60. And that's going to give us a total tax revenue of 20 times 60, which is $1,200. So this is our tax revenue here. This is where we're going to find that we're going to collect from this tax is $1,200, right? Because that's the area of the rectangle of the red and green lines with the backside of the deadweight loss, that black. So now if we want to find like our welfare, if we're concerned about the welfare that we need to be looking at, we want to look at our new consumer and producer surplus. So we're going to go down below the demand curve, right, and above the price. So we're worried about this area. Above our tax revenue box, right there. So that's going to be our new producer surplus, or consumer surplus, but we're also worried about producer surplus. So we want to go above the supply curve and below the price, which is going to look like kind of just the opposite of what we just did. For consumer, we're just going to look at on the producer side. So we're going to go down here along the supply curve, along the backside because you want the height, and along the top, along the bottom of that because we want the quantity. Here, this top line. And that's going to be our producer surplus. So if we want to calculate these things, we just need to look at the area that each of them represent. So if we want to look at, let's say we want to look at our new consumer surplus, right? We're going to have that the quantity sold, or the quantity purchased, which is 20. And we're going to want that discrepancy between each willingness to pay, or each reservation price, and the price paid. So we'll work down that top along the demand curve, and the price paid is 105. So we're going to do, and remember, this is a triangle, so we're going to want to do 0.5 or 1/2 times all of these things. So we'll do 1/2 times 20 bikes, the quantity purchased, times that height there, which is 120 minus 105, and that will give us a final total consumer surplus of 150. And we're going to want to do basically the identical thing on the bottom for producer surplus. We're going to want to work up that supply curve and along the price. But again, we're going to want to multiply that by 0.5 because we're finding the area of this triangle. So we have 20 again for the quantity produced. And we want that difference in price. So we want 45 minus 0. And that will give us a total producer surplus of 450. So we have our total tax revenue of 1,200. We have 150 consumer surplus and 450 producer surplus. And the deadweight loss is going to be, because that's an important thing to think about too, our deadweight loss. And again, it's going to be that area of that triangle. So the quantity lost, equilibrium was 40, and quantity was 20. And another way we can look at deadweight loss is looking at our total total welfare beforehand and our total welfare after, with the tax revenue included. So if we find the total welfare beforehand, so just at equilibrium, it's going to look like, we'll do our total quantity of, remember this is 8.5 because it's a triangle. Total quantity of 40 bikes times our price difference of 120 minus 0 at each end of the price, and that will give us 40 times 120 times 0.5 is 2,400. If we add all of these up, if we add up our total welfare after the tax, we see that after tax we only have a total welfare of 1,200 plus 150 plus 450, which gives us 1,800. So our difference between those is what we recognize as our deadweight loss, which is pre-tax welfare minus post-tax welfare, which gives us 2,400 minus 1,800, which equals a total of $600 of deadweight loss. So that's how we'd go about looking at tax revenue, surpluses, total welfare, and deadweight loss in the case of a tax.